I'm Paul Kay, this is Films to See Before You Die, and tonight we go upriver and out of our minds with Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. Beauty and horror, the ultimate bedfellows. Apocalypse Now is essentially a war poem, as chaotic at its heart as we and the universe we inhabit, enabling its flaws to become just as powerful as its achievements. So astounding is this movie and the conditions and duress it was made under that its making of documentary, appropriately titled Hearts of Darkness, was to all intents and purposes Apocalypse Now 2, and proved to be just as gripping, if not more so, than the film it was actually documenting. Apocalypse Now was embarked upon and created amidst an orgy of human consumption, ego, and vulgar disregard for the sanctity of life. Perfect conditions then to provide cinema and ourselves with a real mirror on the wall experience. Martin Sheen's Willard, the man on the mission, becomes our conscience. Robert Duvall's strutting macho madman Kilgore, our fantasy. And Marlon Brando's shadowy Kurtz, our deepest, darkest fears. Mortality is abject. Not only did Sheen survive a heart attack during the making of this film, he also experienced a drug-induced breakdown on his 30th birthday, which went on to provide Coppola with his perfect opening sequence. If a director is to get anywhere near escaping the celluloid cliches of war, Francis Ford Coppola will tell you that he's got to conduct proceedings right at the heart of the very madness he's trying to recreate. He chooses to napalm rainforests to demonstrate the devastating ecological effects of combat, then echoes our vulgar indifference to third world suffering by flying in top French chefs to lavish rich foods on his own gut to soothe his tortured soul. You got to love him for that. There isn't just blood, sweat and tears to be found on the floor of this movie, but fingernails, cocks and corpses. This is filmmaking at its pure, dark and brutal best, while simultaneously being at its most confused. The critics at the time of its release in 1979 weren't too taken with it, but that's no real surprise. The embodiment of man's lonely nightmare on Earth has got to be one of the more awkward subjects for a critic to tackle on his own, late at night. As a viewer, when you watch Willard's glazed eyes cast themselves from his boat on the Mekong, you feel like a tourist taking in the most terrifying theme ride of them all. I'd advise you to go easy on the acid nachos, stick both arms up in the air, and allow your head to be turned inside out. What on earth has Brando's greased and bloated Kurtz discovered down there deep in the jungle? How can it conceivably be anything other than horror when we call upon our bestial side to sort out our little cultural differences? It's Saigon, it's shit, and it's available right now at a war zone near you. I'm Paul Kay, and tonight in Films to See Before You Die, the dream team of Harvey Keitel and Abel Ferrara deliver the urban nightmare that is Bad Lieutenant. You're about to meet one of the more disturbed individuals in the history of cinema. He's a lieutenant in the NYPD. He's bad, clearly, out of control, out of his head, and inflicting his rage, self-loathing and spiritual disintegration on anything that happens to cross his path. As in Taxi Driver, we're sucked deep into the world of the anti-hero, where it makes perfectly twisted sense for a sick, violent and amoral New York City population to be policed by someone who's sicker, more violent and more immoral than all of them put together. Like Driller Killer before it, Abel Ferrara's work is not for the faint-hearted. This is a brutal film, difficult viewing at times, upsetting and occasionally funny when you just simply can't take being appalled anymore. Essentially, it's a morality play about redemption and faith, specifically the Catholic faith, and Ferrara and Keitel push the envelope with this character so far and to such extremes it almost feels as if humanity itself is at stake here. It's heavy shit. Although criticised and vilified by the critics and the church alike over its content, it's clearly more passionate in its pleading for our collective spiritual health than anything else you could ever find on a cinema screen. This has to be the defining moment in both men's careers. Keitel's character remains nameless, which is appropriate as he is utterly devoid of any identity. Whoever he once was has long since been replaced by a raging addict. As soon as the kids are out of the car on the school run in the morning, he's banging the coke up his nose from behind the wheel. His is a numb, loveless existence. When he flashes his light and pulls over a car with two young girls inside, he forces them to simulate sex acts for him while masturbating through their window from the curbside. It's actually impossible to imagine a lower state of human existence at that point in the film, but it appears every working day for the bad lieutenant is merely an exercise in furthering his degeneration. His obsessive relationship with baseball is a constant reminder of his powerlessness. The New York Mets are the only window of hope he appears to have left in his life, but they let him down over and over again, driving him deeper and deeper into despair and debt. In one of the film's most memorable sequences, he's driving downtown listening to a game and gets so angry he pulls out his gun and shoots the radio. I can relate to that. If I had a gun, my radio would have been shot a long time ago listening to George Galloway on Talk Sport. Suffice it to say, this film is a real heavy number, and the whole thing unfolds like a feature-length nervous breakdown. Keitel gives us everything, as raw and as fearless a performance as you'll ever witness. As a Catholic himself, Keitel at one point has to crawl across a church floor screaming "rat fucker" at a statue of Christ, which gives you some indication of how deep he was willing to dig for this part. It takes the most extreme crime imaginable to finally stir his soul. A nun is brutally raped on a church altar and then violated with a crucifix. As part of his investigation, Keitel eavesdrops on her confession to a priest and is staggered to hear that even though her attackers have defiled all that's sacred to her and her church, she forgives them without question and even prays for their salvation. The bad lieutenant, it seems, has finally met his match in this horror show, and maybe, just maybe, he can be saved too.